But right now, we're going to talk a little baseball here on the program. We're fortunate to be joined by the agent of former Expos great Vladimir Guerrero. He is a member or with the CA Sports Management. That's casportsmgmt.com on the web. Of course, the same abbreviation on Twitter as well. We welcome to the program Greg Maroni. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show. So, obviously, Vladimir Guerrero's a figure that touched a lot of players, fans here in the city. And the fact that he's been out of baseball now for a couple of years is certainly something that the fans would love to see rectified. Last year, of course, Vladimir signs a minor league deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. I know you weren't involved in that. He was with the previous representation, if I'm not mistaken. And I had a chance to speak with the general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays at that time, Alex Anthopoulos, for an article I did for the Montreal Gazette. And he said at the time that they were looking for Vlad to have about 80 at-bats in the minor leagues, kind of like spring training. And obviously, we know what happened. He didn't get those 80 at-bats. They weren't ready to call him up. And then he kind of just walked away from things. So we didn't see him the rest of last year. Now, of course, he's trying to get back into baseball. Where is he at in terms of his willingness to compete for in the minor leagues if need be, and is there any interest brewing for him?
Well, obviously, his first choice is to play, for an MLB affiliated team. He's really trying to get back in and accomplish, reaching 500 home runs. At this point, it seems like there would be some good fits for him, at least certain teams would take a look, maybe the Yankees, the Astros now in the American League, even the Marlins, if he can play some outfield, first base even. But currently the main interest on the table is a team in Taiwan, which is what Manny Ramirez is also already committed to. And I would also be interested in playing in Mexico if they were interested in him. But at this point, he really just wants to get back to playing baseball, and that hopefully a U.S. or Canadian team would look into him and getting back into an MLB situation.
Is he interested in terms of the Taiwan, the Mexico routes? Are those sort of routes that are more appealing to him than, say, just an independent team in the U.S. or Canada somewhere? Because obviously we've seen some of the greats play in those leagues, guys like, of course, Canseco or Ricky Henderson later on in his years. Is that something that he's considering as well, the independence?
It's not something we've expressed to him, and he hasn't expressed that to us. The competition, surprisingly, is not too bad in those leagues over in Asia. As we all know, Japan produces tons of players, but Taiwan is definitely getting more competitive. Mexico is, we feel, very a strong AAA, maybe a 4A type league. And, if we have to go to the independent route, Can-Am League or something like that, maybe. But I think right now we're trying to shoot as high as we can and work our way down. Not to take anything away from the indie league teams, but at this point we think Mexico and Taiwan are stronger leagues.
Well, we'll tell you that there's a Can-Am team north of us here in Quebec City that obviously people would love to see him here in that one if that does happen. Certainly, we're chatting. Sorry, go ahead.
I said you never know. I mean, he's always told us that he loved Montreal and he loved playing for the Expos. And as you saw in that video that we were sent from the DR and we've sent out to Ken Rosenthal and a few other outlets, he's wearing his Expos hat.
It's something where people kind of have said, oh yeah, what about him? 2003 is the last full season that he had here in Montreal prior to, of course, signing his big deal with the Angels. And the last time that anybody saw Guerrero in this city, he was being pulled in the last home game of the season, and I believe it was the 8th inning. The Expos were trailing, and he thought the manager at the time, Frank Robinson, Hall of Famer, thought it would be a nice gesture to maybe get the fans to give him a standing ovation walking off the field. Didn't turn out that way. Fans started throwing things because they wanted to see him bat again. And that's the last memory people have here. As you know, Vlad's not a guy who communicates all that much to the media in English. So there was no, press conference leaving the city. So obviously, we're anxious to see where he does end up. And of course, if you haven't heard it by now, Greg was just talking about the fact that there is a couple of videos out there of Vladimir Guerrero working out in the Dominican Republic, getting into shape for a comeback with Major League Baseball. Ideally, you can check those out as well and see one of them actually on exposnation.com as well, or of course on YouTube. In terms of the gear, like you mentioned that he was wearing in that video, an Expos hat, Expos pants, was that by design, or is it just grabbing stuff that he had lying around?
That's a good question. We didn't. Our instructions to our Dominican partner down there, Carlos Paulino, who actually runs our academy there, and they grew up together, him and Vlad. Our instructions were, we need footage of Vlad, and it was actually shown, I think, on MLB Network, and Harold Reynolds made a comment that it looks like an 8-year-old on a cell phone. Well, it was a 32-year-old on an iPad. So it's kind of one of those things, spring training's going, Vlad wants to join with us, time is of the essence, get us some footage, and I don't know if it was all he had, but I'm pretty sure he's got a lot of gear over the years, and he chose to wear the Expos gear.
Yeah, no, it's
that was on his own volition.
It's certainly nice to see up here. Brings back a lot of memories for people here north of the border. Moving forward, you mentioned some of the teams. I guess obviously with Houston moving over into the American League, it gives players like Guerrero another chance, another opportunity for a DH. I guess that's something that certainly helps your cause.
We like to think so, and they having the Astros in the American League now, they've expressed that they've got a lot of young hitters they want to try out. But, it looks like on paper they might be struggling, and you never know. Maybe Vlad goes to a Can-Am team or Taiwan or Mexico, and, guys go down. It's a long season, and people see that, he still can play. He's working out, and maybe they bring him over as a DH or, just a right-handed pinch hitter off the bench or something.
Would any of those leagues that he signs a contract with, would there be an out if an MLB team showed some interest?
That's a great question. That would be one of our primary clauses we would want to instill in that contract, or a reasonable clause of, an inexpensive buyout from an American or MLB team.
Now, you mentioned first base. That's certainly intriguing for people here who've never seen him field ground balls. We saw a little bit of it in the video, so it's certainly something he's trying to do. Is that realistic? Is that something that he's done in a game, maybe in the Caribbean or something like that?
He's done it in practice. I'm not aware of him actually doing it in games. And, that field they were at, I don't want to compare to other fields, but, the fields that they're at down there in the Dominican Republic, they're not always the best. So at this point, I honestly don't know if it's a realistic thing. I know his arm is still there, and I know his power is still there.
Chatting with Greg Maroni of CA Sports Management. You mentioned you guys have an academy down there. I found an article from 2010 from the New York Times on yourself and your family and some of the others that are working with the Dominican Republic players down there. Just found that interesting. What is the in terms of your academy? How does that work exactly?
Well, it's an interesting point. That when we accepted, to do the interview for that. We thought it was more of a balancing out of the other academies that we'd heard, are not as nice. They don't treat the players as well. And then the way we read it, it kind of came out as kind of not a great article. It was more of a bad article. But in any event, we have players. So unfortunately, kids down there don't go to school past the age of 9 or 10. We never encourage kids to drop out. We encourage them to stay in school. And in the future, down the road, we would really love to have education as a part of our academy so that when, you're seen as over the hill at 18 and you haven't signed yet, well, if you have a GED or equivalent, you can come to the U.S. and get some education here, maybe get another bite at the apple playing college ball. And in worst case scenario, now you're more educated and you might be able to get off the island and get a job in a different Spanish-speaking country.
Well, Greg, we really appreciate your time tonight. Please continue to work the phones for him. We'd love to see Vlad back in competitive baseball. And behalf of all Montreal fans, thank you so much for taking some time tonight to share some thoughts on Vlad and your efforts. Again, the website is casportsmgmt.com. Same name as well on Twitter. Greg, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you for having me.